Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be doing a second Catholic review of Undertale. I'm playing it on the Nintendo Switch, but the story is like identical between versions, besides the Mad Mew Mew fight, but that was basically just a giant teaser for Deltarune. So, in the previous Catholic review, I talked about the value of showing mercy as opposed to hatred. You know, in a typical RPG, you're supposed to defeat as many enemies as possible to earn experience points, and that makes you stronger. However, in Undertale, that actually, EXP stands for execution points, and LV, which typically stands for love, stands for level of violence. And so you're called out for that in a place known as the Judgment Hall, which is basically indicative of the individual judgment that all of us go through on our way to heaven. Or hell. I mean, basically it's when God says, hey, this is all the stuff that you are accountable for that you did wrong, and we're going to see if we can either clean you up or if you just choose not to be with me. So I'm going to talk about the Pacifist and Genocide routes this time, because I mainly focused on the neutral route, because I hadn't actually beaten the Pacifist route myself when I did my previous recording. Now, I actually have done the Pacifist route, and let me tell you, it feels incredible. Basically, it feels like a Jesus simulator, really. It must have been so exhilarating for him when he walked on the earth and healed people, and they were so happy to know that he wouldn't be condemning them because, you know, they were the ones putting him on a cross. He didn't condemn the woman in adultery, but instead he showed mercy, he showed compassion, and he made friends with people that were previously his enemies. Now that I've actually taken the time to go on a hangout with Papyrus, burning down Undyne's house, nerding out with Alphys, not only was it nice to develop friendships with these former bosses slash messed up characters that did some pretty awful things, but they also benefited me in the final battle by providing their power. So I'm not going to touch on the lesbianism of Alphys and Undyne, because you all know how I feel about that. And I also am not really going to touch on the amalgamates a lot, because that's kind of more on the allegorical side as opposed to a Catholic perspective. Basically, just don't be experimenting with things that shouldn't be experimented on as the basic Catholic fundamentals. You know, a man and a woman make a human child. Don't be trying to mess with the natural order. Don't be trying to have a man with a cow, because that's just creepy. So now we're on to how it feels to be on the true pacifist route. For starters, if you die in the final battle, your heart actually refuses to break. It actually says that in exact text on the screen. It says, but it refused. And so you know, man, since I have spared every enemy in the game, that means the final boss is unintentionally sparing me now. And that just feels cool, because you feel like, just like Jesus did, you cheated death. You should have been blasted to smithereens with the over-the-top weapons that the final boss does, but you didn't. And it's kind of the same way with Christianity. Sure, we may go through a really horrible life, say through a concentration camp or torture, but at the end of the day, no matter what, the enemy can't fully hurt us, because even if we do succumb to that, we're just going to end up in heaven and be rewarded even more so, because we are willing to take that next step in martyrdom and dying for our faith and trusting that God had a better plan. In the same way, once the final boss corrupts all of your friends, you have to remind them of who they once were and what they meant to you. Now, I'm not exactly sure where to take this from a Catholic perspective, but I do know that during this process, a new action is given to you called save. Now, throughout the rest of the game, saving has been how you would be able to save your progress. I really don't know how to explain it to you unless you haven't played video games. Basically, if you run out of time to play through the game, then you can save, and then everything you've done up to that point doesn't get erased when you turn the game off. However, the word save takes on a more literal meaning now. You can literally save people from their former selves. Jesus has a way of reaching out to even the worst of sinners and say, hey, I know that you're weak and you're going to go have relapses, but I am going to remind you of how I have come to bring you out of this, how you have come to become a better person. And so you're essentially taking on the role of Jesus, and that just feels pretty darn cool, especially because I can say these are my friends, these are people that I love, people that I care about. It's a very different story than when you actually do the full pacifist route as opposed to just watching it on YouTube. Because if you watch it on YouTube, you're like, oh, that's a cool story, but you don't have the personal connection of saying, wow, my personal friends were saved. And then you get a deeper appreciation of how Jesus must have felt when the worst of sinners would say, hey, you know what? I'm going to repent from my ways, and I feel like living with you for all of eternity. The elation and the joy, which is hard to tell because you never actually see your character's face in the battle. You just have to trust that the inner emotions, that your heart, your brain, your endorphins, whatever you can think of, are sounding really, really joyful. Now, on the more depressing side, let's talk about the Genocide Route, which is the route that I never did. But there's a reason why I never did it, and that's because I don't like killing innocent people, either in real life or in video games. Now, one could argue, oh, well, Toby Fox does call out the player for that, to which I'd say that's exactly what makes it all the more deeply rooted in Catholic tradition, because we believe that even if we are the holiest man or woman in the universe, we're still going to face temptations. We're still going to face people saying, you know what? It wouldn't be that bad to do the wrong thing. You know, even Jesus himself, God incarnate, said, or he encountered temptation in the desert with his encounter with Satan. But yet Jesus mastered the temptation. He said, no. He said, the world depends on me. Sure, it could be easy if I take this route. Sure, it would make my journey easier if I turn these stones into bread, but I'm trying to preserve my spirit and set an example. So I must say no to those comforts that I deserve. In the same way, well, it's certainly tempting to want to play the Genocide Route, to hear people say, oh, don't be a wuss, just do it, be a man, be a woman, whatever you are, and just have the guts. To which we as Catholics have to say, no, we are not going to go out of our way to kill an innocent. Even though there are 2 insanely awesome boss fights in the Genocide Route and basically nothing else besides super duper creepy music, that's not worth all of that pain and suffering. In fact, Genocide Route doesn't really offer any particular rewards of any kind. So, for instance, say you do go through the Genocide Route. You end up defeating Sans at the end. Sans has been nothing but your friend throughout the Pacifist route and sort of the neutral route if you chose not to kill Papyrus. And to have him be your worst enemy and then the game taunting you that it's the easiest enemy and to just get it over with. But yet you're so arrogant by that point that you've basically taken on the mindset of the character. You've essentially said, nothing can stand in my way. All of these enemies except Undyne were one-hit kills, so why should Sans be any different? Not only that, but if you check Sans during the battle, it'll say that he only has 1 attack and 1 defense, and that he's the easiest enemy. And while that is true, it doesn't make his attack patterns easier to dodge. He puts up a ferocious fight because he knows that you are the final boss, and right now it is his job as the player to stop you from destroying the world. Now, one could argue that's a little bit extreme, but think about it. You've annihilated an entire race, and even though you could say, well, you know what, it's a video game, so they're just a bunch of pixels. But yet, at the same time, You could also say that you're starting to take on the attitude as though you were in the world. So, for instance, once you get far enough in the genocide route and you start looking for enemies to make sure that counter goes down to 0 monsters left in the area, the icon changes to that of a smiley face instead of a surprised look. And I watched YouTuber Snowman Gaming say that when he did the genocide route, he started being happy to see enemies to kill. So in other words, you're taking on these improper emotions that you should not be having because you shouldn't be killing people. And let me be honest with you guys, there are times when I want to play the genocide route. I want to know, what is it like to face Undyne in a battle to death? What is it like to have the jump scare at the end that causes the entire game to crash? How does it affect the Switch version? Because this was originally optimized for the PC. There's a lot of questions about how do I personally feel and would I like to experience those emotions when everyone on YouTube is saying, oh, you gotta see it for yourself. You can't just watch a walkthrough. But the thing is, after watching a walkthrough, it made me come to a deeper appreciation of seeing people in those situations and not wanting to put them into a position where they would feel threatened, where even people that haven't even met you yet are ashamed of your reputation. Basically, the genocide route of Undertale talks about the ripple effect of sin. How sure, you may sin in North Dakota, and it may have consequences in Florida, and you may not even know it at the time. But at the end of time, who knows, maybe it did have some far-reaching disastrous consequences. So basically, the genocide route makes you... The game asks you if you think you're above consequences. Most people are going to say yes, because they're like, it's just a game. How can I have consequences from a game? But then the player feels frustrated because they're not able to boot back up the game after they finish a genocide route until they wait for 10 real-time minutes, and then they have to answer correctly that they are not above consequences. So in other words, the player is frustrated. Then the game, in turn, is frustrated with the player because it says, why would you want to go back? You've experienced everything there is to do. You've pushed this world to the edge. You were warned so many times not to do this. Why do you want to go back to the world you destroyed? And the game wants to make it painfully obvious that you are a killer. And the only way you can rid yourself of that stain is to like I said, I don't know how it works on the Switch, but at least on the PC version, you have to delete the entire program from your computer's memory and then reinstall it from scratch. You have to give up everything and start completely over. In fact, even if you do manage to bribe the game to sell your soul and then actually do the pacifist route, your character's eyes will still flash red, and you'll see all of your friends with crossed out X's because, while in this timeline you may not have killed them, you did kill them. And even if you were to go through the whole rigmarole of saying, I'm sorry, I'm really, really, really sorry, you're still going to have that stain on your soul in your mind. I don't think you're ever going to forget that you once upon a time butchered everyone in the world, even though most of the people never tried to hurt you. At most, they might have just bumped into you or thought you were scary and tried to defend themselves. The only way we can be rid of sin, in that sense, is by going to God and asking Him for a clean restart. Only God can absolve sins. While we as Catholics believe that priests are given that authority, the only reason they're given that authority is because Jesus passed it on. So it's essentially like a mailman giving a letter. The mailman didn't write the letter. The mailman is delivering the letter from the other source. So in the same way, the priest is delivering God's saving grace. The priest is delivering God's saving grace through the confessional. However, in the Undertale world, there's not really that much implication that there is a God, apart from the Deltarune symbol on the stained glass windows. So you have to take your word that if you play this game perhaps as an atheist or an agnostic, there's going to be a sense of dissatisfaction in the Genocide Route because there is no reward. You just did it because you thought you could do it, not because you had a genuine desire, but because you were tempted. And there's no way around it. The game told you were going to have nothing but a bad time. You didn't listen. And that's the beauty of Christianity, is that we are told ahead of time, no, this is the wrong way to go. This is just going to make you miserable in the long run. You may feel happy now, but you're not going to feel happy by the end of this. So please just stop. Show mercy. Be kind to your enemies. And then, even if it's not right away, you will eventually receive the ultimate reward. So with that said, thank you very much for listening. If I missed anything at all, please let me know in the comment section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and do not do the Genocide Route in real life. That's just creepy. Bye.